What motivates people to choose the same option collectively? Why is the chaos in the system inevitable? And why do societies go in only one direction, naturally? Here it is important to look at Robert Conquest's three laws. A historian, Conquest's three laws are not without a precedent. The first law is essentially a reasonability test. When anyone is comfortable with the system, the general tendency is to remain with the system. Even then, there is a general movement towards the left, as outlined in the second law. When Mencius Moldbug gave the concept of Cathedral, he essentially explained why a theory of conspiracy need not be established in order to argue why there is a general movement towards a left-leaning goal in a system. His argument was, in essence, that the Cathedral, which is a left-wing organization, consisted of individual people motivated by same desires that keep the system running forward and prevent it from fluctuating around a point in either directions. It is the convergence of interests that keeps a loosely organized and decentralized establishment to work. This is related to the concept of emergent behavior, which is to be contrasted with a conspiracy. Academic Agent, a British YouTuber with videos on philosophy, politics, and economics primarily, argued this difference and why the subversion of 2020 US presidential election against Trump was a conspiracy and not an emergent behavior. His argument is based on a Time article, which is a boasting by the left of its subversive operations in the election by conspiring with tech giants, social media companies, rich businessmen, civil rights leaders, and a part of general populace, along with varied intellectuals and elected officials. While both the emergent behavior and conspiracy seem to explain system-level events, there is a significant issue with the Cathedral explanation. When Moldbug gave the idea of Cathedral, he brought a new way of thinking to the table at an academic level. Moldbug is not the first one to lay down the idea of emergent behavior, which is an idea prevalent in the right, or was prevalent in the proto-right from the ancient times. What Moldbug did was explain why it seems that all havocs are let loose from all sides when someone goes against the normal left-aligned narrative present in the society, when the society comprises of individuals committing discrete actions. Why all of this seems so coordinated? One explanation was that there was a giant behind-the-scenes conspiracy. It was the case, at least to an extent, but there was a problem. One machinery had been established behind the scenes that it could rile up the people from the top to the bottom of the hierarchy in a very little time period. How could it maintain the purity of such a vast system and prevent it from infiltration and division? Moldbug's argument was, which is popular among new reactionaries, that each element of the cathedral benefits from siding with the others for a common cause. This creates instantaneous unity. Whenever the cathedral sees anyone opposing its power, its each element seeks to take down that person himself or herself. There is no need to motivate them to do so. While Moldbug's analysis was valuable and also true, it suffered from a problem. How could millions of people have similar alignment? How could they all agree to the same thing? And how did the left know what points would they all agree on? It was clear that the left picked its battles. How did that come about? Leftist ecosystem does not merely exhibit unity towards a cause, but also coordination. And it also exhibits a form of expansiveness. There's also another explanation looming somewhere. The theory that here could be argued for could be called the theory of diffused dominance. Thomas Hobbes was very much on point when he argued that civilization is an attempt against brutishness. While disregarding his other views, the fact that the society is ultimately formed by taming brutishness cannot be disputed, even if other accessories and auxiliaries to such creation are rejected. However, society, or rather civilization, as has been often observed on the right, is not created by taming immoral behavior, but rather a sense of difference and distinction, and its expression in a sense of appearance of brutishness. While it does often align with regulation of behavior that could be considered immoral, it does not always. For example, society's regulation of murder is not because murder is immoral per se, but because murder is an act against the society. It presents a state of wildness, a state of dissidence. Insofar such dissidence is exhibited without a sense of meekness, it is dangerous and must be curtailed. When it is exhibited with meekness, however, it is a tool. While in case of murder, it is hard to argue that it is ever tamed, though killing in case of abortion, of course, is and is legal and morally acceptable in many circumstances. There are many more grey areas within the expanse of action, aside from murder. This taming allows cooperation because it diffuses dominance from a person to the rest, whether they deserve that or not. This makes everyone content. This is in fact the idea behind democracy. Democracy does not give an individual any power. It was never designed to do so. It just takes the power away from one man, the king, a few men, the nobles. In fact, one could argue that an individual has even less power in democracy because more people need to be convinced, which can never be done unless one is supported by already established media, academia, and entertainment industry, the exact three pillars leftists sought to seize. No wonder Plato argued how a society moves naturally towards a democracy. The very concept of a society is about diffusing dominance among various people to eliminate bad competition. When any spirit of dominance is exhibited, their dissidence is crushed, and people do not need an external convincing to perform that, or even need to be considerate of their own desires or their own well-being. They just do it like a robot, because it's an animalistic instinct. The gradual decrease in respect of dominant behavior is seen throughout the progression of society, especially from conversion of patriarchy to traditionalism, to liberalism and feminism, to intersectionalism. All of this is an attempt to curb the instinct of distinction and separation which the society hates unless it is a product of consumption. This is where Huxley's argument, which again did not exist before him, about use of pleasure to bind people plays a role. The dominance itself is diffused towards pursuit and by means of desires, and then the conspiracy becomes easy to execute. To understand that, let us take a look at three important points from the Time article. Describe the process of subversion. The article calls it a battle, not for getting a victory for a particular side, but for free and fair elections, a mantra leftists have often cited. But not only the whole article explicitly lays down how this was a strategy against Trump, a running candidate, but also how the perpetrators got several changes enacted specifically for this election. If these changes did not exist before, and were only enacted to defeat Trump, how are they fair? And if there was a justifiable reason for them, who decided what was fair and why was a shadow operation needed? Even on adding anything that is given in the article, designed to not confess to any crime directly, it shows that it was a partisan attempt. But clearly the article also says that even non-partisan people and conservatives rallied against Trump in this operation, which is probably written to both fend off exclusive criticism of the left for this subversion, but also because it is partly true. But one of the most interesting things is to call Trump autocratically inclined. This is to say that Trump is inclined to be a dictator. It is a curious point, but is often seen, and not just against Trump, but many right-wing presidents or prime ministers. What specific actions made Trump autocratic? If Trump did cross a boundary of doing things which were beyond his power, then a specific action could have been taken against him. If none were taken, who was to decide that he breached official boundaries of power? And if his issuing of executive orders made him autocratically inclined, then clearly the prize for being the most autocratic president of the United States goes to Joe Biden for having broken the record of issuing the most number of executive orders. Trump is neither a dictator nor is leaning towards dictatorship, at least objectively. He is, however, in minds of people who are against him. Leftists and liberals' repeated calls to declare anyone who is against them, and of anyone else for that matter in certain cases, is nothing but a complaint about appearance of dominance. Trump is bad, not because he is dominating others, but because he does not accept diffused dominance, or rather dominance of others over him, or at least this is how the leftists see him. Trump is not as tamed as people like to see him, and of course, that is why he became a great person to meme in favor of. Unapologetic, In many cases, he appears to be a man to himself, and that is why he is hated. This is the reason why he would be fought with a barrage of tweets from the offended liberals whenever he would make a comment. They would make all attempts possible in order to prove and establish their dominance, both as individual and a collective, over him. And this peace, which while may be instrumental for other purposes, is them enjoying the fruits of quashing Trump's dominance and satisfying their egos. And for this reason, they are confessing to their subversion.